Hi, I'm Heather Marie Montilla, and you're watching PBS Books. Good evening. I welcome you to tonight's conversation, Finding Your Roots, Family Sagas of Pride and Perseverance. Genealogy has the power to connect us with our own family histories, to tell us where we came from and who we are. But it also has much to say about the communities we live in and even the larger national narrative. Today, we will focus on the unique challenges and opportunities that African Americans face as they trace their family histories. We will hear from a panel of skilled genealogists who will unlock secrets and solve mysteries and explain how genealogy can knit generations together. We will hear lessons and family sagas we can all learn from. Of course, we want to acknowledge that our event tonight is inspired by the work of the great PBS historian, scholar, and master storyteller, Henry Louis Gates Jr., who has made genealogy a national pastime. His series, Finding Your Roots, is now in its 9th season and remains one of the most enduring and popular programs on PBS. Besides Dr. Gates and his team, we would also like to thank Detroit Public Television and WETA, the public television station in Washington, D.C., for helping us to produce this digital conversation, which is being viewed across the nation in communities. Especially, it's being shared by libraries and local PBS stations. Let's take a moment for a stirring scene from an episode of Finding Your Roots, which will set the stage for today's conversation.
In the 1870 census, we found Nisi's fourth great-grandfather, Aaron Cobb, living in Union County, Arkansas. Moving back a decade, we saw that the 1860 census for the same county contained a slave schedule for a white planter named Azariah Cobb. The enslaved people on this schedule are not listed by name. But even so, we wondered, could Azariah have owned Aaron? We found our answer in the estate records of Azariah's father-in-law.
I, Joel Brazil, being in a low state of health, but in perfect mind, do make and publish my last will and testament in manner following. I give and bequeath unto my daughter, Rosanna Cobb, one Negro boy named Aaron. I'll be damned.
So we could confirm with that will what you were seeing without names on the previous page.
That's them.
This will was written by a planter in Tuscaloosa County, Alabama. His name was Joel Brazil. It bequeaths Nisi's fourth great-grandfather, Aaron, to Brazil's daughter, Rosanna, who had married into the Cobb family.
Just passing people around, passing them down.
And he was just a child.
He was a child. That his heart is heartbreaking. You know? I don't know, it's kind of like, and it's weird because you grow up knowing what slavery is. You grow up knowing the institution. You grow up still feeling the ripple of what it is for us in today. But somehow when you can go back and read this actual document, it still feels like a gut punch.
Well, it's personalized.
Yeah.
You have DNA from Aaron. It's not some abstract concept anymore.
No.
No.
It's right here.
It's right there.
Wow.
Digging deeper, we discovered that Joe Brazil was originally from what was known as Pendleton District, South Carolina. And in the 1820 census, we saw that he owned a boy who almost certainly was Aaron.
And on your left, you can see a map of Joe Brazil's land in 1825. Nisi, we believe that that's where your fourth great grandfather Aaron was born, right there in Pendleton District.
Wow.
And that area experienced a cotton boom during the late 18th and early 19th century. And the enslaved people on Joe Brazil's plantation likely worked from sunrise to sundown. And once your fourth great grandfather Aaron reached the age of 8, he would have most likely joined them out in the fields.
Yeah. Wow.
There is a grace note to this story. In the 1870 census, we found Aaron living near his son Henry. And we noticed something incredible about Henry. He was a landowner. At a time when less than 5% of all black families living in the South owned any real estate, Henry had $850 worth of property, likely amounting to hundreds of acres.
Oh man, this is awesome.
It is cool.
This is awesome.
You got it.
You know-
Industrious and save money.
Well, especially when you look at all of the hardship, all of the pain, all of the experience, all of the things you're born into, all of the, things that you've seen, witnessed.
Oh,
you know what
yeah.
I mean? And you still said, I'm going to figure out a way to take care of my family and be successful.
Right. What do you think you inherited from them?
I feel like when you can come from something so hard and that was not just hard because it was hard because it was meant to destroy you.
Meant to destroy. They made it hard.
So I used to, when I first started in entertainment, the 3 words that I would live by are no matter what. If I gotta go to an audition to be funny and I'm crying because of this or that, no matter what. No matter what, you show up and you pull up. And I feel like my no matter what of it all has a different meaning and context when I look at this. Because this is the no matter what of it all.
Literally. And if they hadn't embraced that philosophy, there'd be no Nisi.
There would be no Nisi.
No matter what.
My God.
Just a reminder that Finding Your Roots is now streaming at pbs.org. Also, check your local listing. Well, now I would like to introduce the amazing moderator for tonight's event, Leslie C. Strong Williams, immediate past president of the Fred Hart Williams Genealogical Society. Based at the Detroit Public Library, it was the first genealogical society in the state of Michigan dedicated to the research and preservation of African American history and culture. A remarkable mentor and advocate for those seeking to understand their family's roots, Leslie has led us on our genealogical journey and welcome the other members of the panel as well. Thank you, Leslie, for being here, and we look forward to you leading the conversation.
Thank you so much, Heather. It is my honor to moderate our conversation tonight as together we explore how to trace and revere our unique family histories. There is never a straight path in genealogy. It is filled with twists and turns, but we will consider the special challenges of African American families as they search through countless genealogical records. They encounter incomplete documents, searching for ancestors whose names and locations have been changed or omitted by history. Thankfully, there are new tools, historical and scientific, to unlock family mysteries. We will present some methods and tips that should help anyone who wants to take this captivating journey with us. Joining me today are 4 remarkable women who will reveal some of those secrets and share surprising facts and inspiring stories they discovered about their own family histories. And we will even learn something about Henry Louis Gates Jr. himself. Let me first introduce them as a group, and then ask each to tell us more about themselves and what genealogy has meant to them. First is Cheryl Garnett, who is the current president of the Washtenaw County African American Genealogical Society here in Southeast Michigan, and a board member of the Fred Hart Williams Genealogical Society. For years, she was the director of occupational therapy at the Ann Arbor VA Hospital. Next, there is Omerjean Winborn, co-founder of the Washtenaw County African American Genealogical Society and vice president of the Fred Hart Williams Genealogical Society. Omerjean is a retired educator. Representing the millennial generation is Jasmine Davison, a graduate of Spelman College. She balances taking care of her young son and family with her love for genealogy. Finally, we are honored to have with us today LaJoy Mosby, the national president of the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society, Incorporated, which is based in Washington, D.C. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Glad to be here.
Good. Cheryl, can I ask you to
Yes.
start the conversation by explaining how you became interested in genealogy and what it has instilled in you?
Thank you, Leslie. That's a wonderful question, and I'm happy to answer it. My journey in genealogy started with my maternal grandmother, who, when I was 16, shared with me a copy of our family tree that ended with her generation. And she asked me if I would please complete the family tree. She also shared with me a story about her grandmother, who she said was a baby on the Underground Railroad. Those comments and that promise that I made to her to finish her tree set me on this journey of finding my family and really putting my family back together again. My great grandmother, in sharing with our family the story of how her grandmother came to the United States, also helped me move forward in this journey. She shared with me the story of her grandparents, who were an enslaved man and the wife of his former enslaver, who fell in love and went on through the Underground Railroad on to Canada. Those stories and the family history that we were actually in Canada before the development of the Underground Railroad really got me started, because it was something that I thought everyone had those kind of connections, but found out that really we were a very unique family, and that we were in Canada in the 1830s and the 1840s. And I needed to figure out how we got there and how we got back to the United States. That was how my journey began and how I got started.
That's wonderful, Cheryl. Omerjean, you were Cheryl's partner in creating the Genealogical Society that has opened so many doors for African Americans seeking to understand their roots. Would you mind telling us about the personal journey you took into your family's history?
Absolutely. I am the daughter of William and Minnie Dixon. My surnames include Dixon, Rivers, Taylor, Allen, and Beasley. Both my parents were sharecroppers from Brownsville, Tennessee, who migrated to Ann Arbor in the mid-40s. I was born and raised in Ann Arbor in 1950, one of 6 children, all of us college graduates. I did not know until I was in graduate school that my father couldn't read. I knew that this man, my parents, came from greatness, simply because of all the things that they had accomplished. I grew up in a strong African American community. Everyone in that community had the right to discipline me, and they did. So I started researching my parents' life. And when I started, the most recent census was the 1920s. I looked at so much microfilm that I got motion sickness. I used vital records, census records, oral histories, traveled to several history centers, attended conferences, joined genealogical societies. I had a good foundation of what my parents' life was like. Then DNA came, and my first match was with my cousin Letha Rivers. She was on my father's side. Our grandparents were siblings. Letha gave me an old family reunion book, and that made it possible for me to trace my family back to their enslavement. My next DNA match was with a person who had grown up in Ann Arbor and had Canadian roots. Again, a Taylor Rivers Richardson connection. So this is when I turned to Cheryl, and who I had been friends with for several years. I asked Cheryl if she could tell me how I was related and connected to this branch of my family. Her suggestion was for us to travel to the Buxton Museum in Canada, where they kept all the Canadian family histories. Well, guess what? We traveled to Canada, we obtained the records, and much to my sheer surprise and delight, we discovered we were cousins on both sides of our family.
That's powerful.
The beginning of amazing family history with connections to all kinds of people.
That's very powerful, Imogene. Thank you. Jasmine, more and more millennials are becoming intrigued with genealogy and exploring their family's background. Why do you find that so important?
Thank you, Leslie. And thank you, everyone, for inviting me tonight. I'm so excited to be here. Well, first of all, there's two reasons that come to mind in regards to why it's important for young people to research their genealogy. The first reason being, as African Americans in America, we have trauma that's been passed down from generation to generation. And so in order to really know what you're up against as a young person, I think it's necessary to take a look back at your family, at the history. Sometimes you'll find, dysfunctions. You'll find things that you might want to correct as a young person on your own personal journey. And so that all of that just starts with information. And for me, my family and I, we started this journey in genealogy about 5 years ago. My mother, Imogene, who's actually my cousin on my maternal side, we all basically started looking into our history, and we found a lot of really interesting information on the journey. I did have a chance to visit some places where my family lived and walked in Brownsville, Tennessee, as Imogene mentioned, as well as on my paternal side. We took a trip to Andalusia, Alabama last summer. And so it was really a wonderful experience to be able to, to see where family that I heard, stories about, where they walked and where they lived. And then on the flip side, the second reason why I think it's important for young people is because a lot of times when you're doing that research, sometimes you do find really fun and cool attributes that some of your ancestors had. So, for example, on my maternal side, my third great grandmother, her name was Evelina. On the 1920 census, we found her listed in a white household as a cook. And so her granddaughter, who was my great grandmother, her name was Elnora. She actually was an amazing cook, and she had an opportunity to travel and cook culinary. And so now I see why I have cooking skills. And so things like that, you get to learn who you are when you understand where you came from.
Wonderful family traditions you're sharing with us.
For sure.
LaJoy, we are so happy to have you with us.
Glad to be here.
Could you please tell us about the important work of the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society and what it has meant to you?
Well, I have been a member of OGS since 2000, and for the past 46 years, OGS has really strived to aid the African American community as we seek to identify our ancestors, make connections, and tell the stories of our communities. Now, over the years, we've been involved in a variety of wonderful projects, and we produce peer-reviewed journals along with newsletters that tell the stories of our ancestors. We also discuss African American communities nationwide, and we review relevant publications. Now, at the chapter level, we're involved in a variety of projects. Cemetery restoration, we educating youth about genealogy, providing programs and presentations on genealogy and African American history, as well as partnering with local and state historical and genealogical societies to educate the general public on African American genealogy. In addition to the public programs, our chapter meetings allow our members to learn genealogy methods and strategies via case studies and personal journeys of how we discovered our ancestors and broken down brick walls. At the national level, one of our recent projects was the Black Liberators Project that we did in partnership with the Embassy of the Netherlands. This was a descendants research project that involved identifying living relatives of World War II soldiers who died in their attempt to liberating the Netherlands, and they're interred there in the military cemetery there. So through our chapters and national conferences, we've created a network of like-minded people with similar interests who are interested in documenting their family histories for all of the world to see.
That's wonderful. You've raised some great points about why it's important to join an organization. Yes, thank you. Before we move on, I'd like to invite our viewers to type their questions in the chat for a Q&A that's scheduled for at the end of our discussion. Now let's dive into the special challenges facing African American families as they try to unravel their families' histories. Cheryl, frequently names of enslaved ancestors have been changed, or they were just tick marks on slave schedules or census records. Examples include misspellings and nicknames. Why was this so common, and what does that mean for genealogists? And what is that brick wall of 1870, and how does it exemplify the challenges we are talking about?
Well, I think the previous segment that where we looked at Nisi's family, it's that prior to 1870, as you said, African Americans weren't listed by names, rather by sex, age, and sometimes by color. So once we begin our research, we sort of start with ourselves and move backwards. And when we get to 1870, we hit that brick wall, because there we have to go to the 1860 or the 1850 slave schedules, and we can't find names. One of the things that I say and try to educate people is, because of my family history, is to look for their ancestors in Canada. Because prior to the Civil War, there were over 40,000 free people living in Canada who, after the Civil War or during the Civil War, came back to fight on behalf of their families, to free their families, and stayed. But they were in Canada prior to that. So sometimes you can't find them because they weren't in the United States. Mm-hmm. But again, like you said, the names change. Sometimes that happens because as families were sold or given to other family members, they would change their last names. If we remember, African Americans weren't allowed to read and write, and so names were frequently just spelled the way they sounded. And so sometimes those names are you can't find them the way they're spelled. Or sometimes people who, when they ran away to become free, they changed their names so they could not be found. There are lots of those kinds of issues that are common to African Americans when they're looking for their ancestors and aren't able to find them in the census records, because we start with the census and move back. And when you're looking for names, look for names that sound like that they may be your ancestors' names. Also, it's important to learn the nicknames. For instance, Sarah and Sally are the same, but Sally is the nickname for Sarah. And if you didn't know that, you might find your ancestor and think, well, that's not my ancestor because her name is Sarah. But actually, Sally and Sarah are the same. So it really is educating yourself about, first of all, African American history is very important to figure out what was going on in what particular state your family's from, or the particular counties, because that also is a stumbling block, because as the states came into the Union, the boundaries changed. I have that example in my family where there was a county that was in Virginia that when North Carolina was formed, that county is now in North Carolina. So those are difficult issues for African Americans looking for their family members. So you really have to sort of research your family, background, and then research the city, the towns, and the communities that they lived in.
Those are excellent points you've raised, Cheryl. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We've talked about the difficulties African Americans have faced as they seek to explore their family histories, but we continue to persevere. Let's talk about strategies we genealogists have developed to overcome these hurdles. Omar Jean, will you please address, for those who are new to genealogy and interested in learning about their family's history, what are the most important steps they can follow, and what are the most reliable resources readily available to researchers?
Yes, thank you. Document. Make sure you fill out your pedigree charts and your family group sheets. Use census records. Start with the most recent, 1950, and follow it back to 1870. Collect vital records, birth, death certificates. Look in the cemeteries. Look for delayed birth certificates. Do oral history. Obtain history from everyone. Many of my cousins have relationships with some of the older adults in their family, and so those interview everybody. If there are no older adults in your family, look for older people in the community and interview them. Interview, don't interrogate. Interview, have a conversation with them. Use and exhaust all the online resources. Travel to the place where your ancestor lived. Use your library. Cheryl and I are filming in the Ypsilanti District Library, and this is where our association starts, in the library.
Wonderful. That's excellent point also, Omar Jean. DNA tests like 23andMe and Ancestry have become very popular. Cheryl, have they proved to be useful in genealogical research?
Yes, they have. I've had some exciting breakthroughs just by my finding my DNA cousins. I use Ancestry, and Ancestry helps you find your autosomal matches. And through my autosomal matches, as I said, I have an ancestor who came on the Underground Railroad with his wife. He was a former enslaved man, and the wife was the widow of the man who formerly enslaved him. And she came with her 4 children. Well, just recently, I was able to contact one of her 3rd great grandchildren from her first marriage. That was very exciting because otherwise I had no way of knowing I knew who her children were, but I didn't have a way of contacting or knowing whether or not she had any descendants. Also, one of the exciting matches that I found and was able to for my family, confirm that William Perry, who was the first African-American man to be hired by Henry Ford, was actually one of my descendants. He is the older brother of my great-grandfather. The family had been questioning whether this William Perry was part of our family or not. I'm fortunate in that I have a first cousin, William McMillan, who does all the DNA research for the McMillan family. I found out from one of my cousins, who's a Miller, that the Millers once were named McMillan. And when they went to Tennessee, they changed their names to Miller. Well, that finding was that my mother's mother, my grandmother, married a Miller. And so the question now is, if he was formerly a McMillan, and that's my maiden name, did my mother actually marry someone who's related to her grandfather?
Oh my.
Track that down. But DNA really can help you expand your family tree, introduce you to new family members, and help you put the family back together again. And that's sort of what I feel like I'm doing with Jane King and my cousins, putting us back together again. I say that DNA helps to undo what slavery did. And that is to find those cousins that were maybe in North Carolina, maybe in Tennessee, because our people were sold in different directions. But to be able to find those cousins now that you have DNA connections to, it's really important. And you can put your family back together. As Jean said, if you do the paperwork And that's doing your pedigree charts, and then going on and doing the family group sheets. As you find people, you can find how they're connected to your family. And that's really exciting. We've been doing Zoom meetings to introduce ourselves to each other. That's what's, I think, fun. That's the fun part of doing this, is being able to reconnect your family.
Making those connections are so important. Thank you, Cheryl.
Yes.
Speaking of DNA, Omar Jean, would you like to share your surprising DNA results with us?
Yes, I'm a DNA cousin to Dr. Henry Louis Gates.
And how did you discover that?
From a DNA, I tested in another, I used Ancestry, and then I tested in another DNA, another company, another DNA company.
That's quite a revelation. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's turn to LaJoy. Will you speak to the advantages of joining a genealogical group or society?
Sure. You know, there are lots of reasons to join a genealogical society. One of the reasons is if you're the only person in your family that really enjoys this, now you're in a group of like-minded people. You all have the same interests. You'll have an opportunity to meet new people who are, as I said, who have the similar interests. You can work with others, and you can share what you've learned, share your experiences, and share your findings. Being part of a society, you can learn from each other. You discover new records, and you can help the genealogy world by participating in new projects that reveal new information. I have had a wonderful opportunity of meeting wonderful people just by being a member of OGS. I've learned so much. I have improved my own skills. Haven't met any cousins within OGS yet, but I think that it's a wonderful opportunity for anyone. It's everybody should attempt to join a society or a group that's in their community.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's always great to have that kind of support.
Yes.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Many people become interested in their family histories as they grow older, but an increasing number of younger people have begun to reach out to the elders of their families, their parents, the grandparents, their aunts and uncles. In fact, the earlier they begin to engage and capture their relatives' oral histories, the better their results. LaJoy, will you share the innovative strategies we can use to get young people interested in genealogy or family history?
Thank you. Well, there are a lot of things we can do. I think sometimes we just think the young people are not interested, but we have to be creative about it. So you can engage young children in developing family trees, pull out those old photos when you have family gatherings like Thanksgiving or Christmas, and start showing your young people or your children what your family members looked like when they were their age, giving them some context about the whole connection of family and what it was like perhaps to be a kid in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, or even 70s. You can create a family video, have the young people video the elders and create a video and maybe add a reel to Instagram or TikTok. You can create an electronic scrapbook or even an actual scrapbook with narratives and photos and images of documents from each generation. One of the things that I think we all should do if you have children or grandchildren or nieces, nephews, etc., is that young people have social studies and American history coursework. So for example, if your student is studying the 1940s and the Great Depression or around that era, check the 1940 census, the 1930 census. What were your families doing at this time? Were they employed? Where were they living? Were they employed in one of those FDR New Deal programs? Mm-hmm. I think that it makes it real when you can show a young person that this is what our family was doing or going through at this particular time. Also, let's not leave out the creatives. You can make art with family artifacts, once you determine their value, that is. Or you can listen to music that your relatives would have enjoyed, or you can perhaps create music of your own. One of our members in my chapter actually created playing cards that had family photos on one side and facts on the other for the family to use while playing bid whist, for example, at family gatherings. Things are like that.
That's very creative. Thank
Yes.
you. Now let's hear from our young millennial, Jasmine. When you became engaged in learning about your family story, how did you go about it and what did you learn? Was DNA testing one of the first tools you used? And do you primarily use online resources or visit brick and mortar institutions or both? And have you traveled to places where your family lived?
Yeah, I have. And my family and I, we primarily use ancestry.com. And so it started off basically with the DNA tests. Everybody was tested. Very easy process. They mail you everything. It's very, self-explanatory. The instructions are easy to understand. And when we got that information back, we just went onto the system and started looking people up. And so I also do a lot of talking to people that are older in our family. And so I turn on my voice recorder and I just let them go and I ask them questions. And you'll find a lot of times older people, they enjoy telling stories from where they came from and the experiences that they've had. And so it's one of those things that generally makes them happy. So I did a lot of that, and essentially we just ended up finding a lot of cool insight. We found a grandparent of mine that we didn't know. My grandmother did not know her father. My great grandmother didn't know her father, and so we were able to find him. And it's really been a good, interesting experience.
Well, thank you, Jasmine. I think we all agree you have become the griot of your family branch, the keeper of the family oral histories and the tradition of our West African ancestors. So we've given you that official title tonight.
I receive it.
Thank you. What a wonderful conversation we've had this evening. To quote Cheryl, we all agree it's a story that cannot be told in 40 minutes. We've done our best to help you understand how we've conquered some of the challenges and how we are all related. Our ancestors have done the hard part. They have sacrificed, suffered, struggled, and survived. Now we are doing the easy part, finding them. Clearly, this discussion could go on for hours, and I hope it will in all of your households. I want to express my gratitude to our esteemed panel. You have provided immeasurable practical advice, as well as considerable and heartfelt insights about the work we all do. I can't thank you enough. Of course, we all need to thank Henry Louis Gates Jr., or should I call him Cousin Henry, for igniting a national fervor for genealogy, which has helped each of us to learn so much about where we came from and who we are. And finally, thanks to all of you for watching. I would encourage you to become involved in your local genealogical society. They're very easy to find online, and African American genealogists want nothing more than to unite families through discovering, documenting, and preserving their histories in their own words. Now, let me check the questions in our chat and see if there's some that our panel members would like to answer. Let's see, here's one. Edie Denise Neely on Facebook asked, how do you actually get started if your elders are deceased? LaJoy, would you like to take that one?
Sure, I'll take that one. Ms. Neely, what I would suggest is what we always suggest in genealogy is that you start with yourself. So you start with yourself and you work your way back. If you know the names of your deceased elders, you can look for them in census records. And then from there, you can branch out to a variety of records to begin to tell more of their story. I had the pleasure of having my grandmothers and my great-grandmother for a time. But after that, I had to go back and look for death certificates, which also are very revealing because they, hopefully, if they're correct and the informant gave good information. You can find the parents of the former generation. But start with yourself. Use census records. Gather everything you know about the persons that have passed away. If you have obituaries, if you have school records, if you have marriage certificates, all of those things can help you tell their stories and put that information together, and allows you to create a tree that will give you some insight into the lives of those people who perhaps you did not know. I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you. Tammy, I hope I pronounced this correctly, Fabic Fletcher is also watching on Facebook, and she asked, do you know of other genealogical societies out there or where to look for them? Cheryl, would you like to answer that one?
Yes, most states have genealogical societies, and you can actually go online and put in the state, put in the genealogical society, and see what comes up through that, and that will lead you to whether or not they're local or just statewide organizations. Again, Google can be your friend. Google the state, Google the county, and Google Genealogical Society and see what comes up. I know, we have most local areas. Another idea I have is to check with the Family Search Center in your community and see if they know of whether or not there are any genealogical societies in your community.
Great. Thank you, Cheryl. It looks like we don't have any more time for questions, so I just want to thank you to all of our viewers for your questions, and now I'm going to throw it back to Heather. Thank you.
Well, Leslie, thank you so much. And thank you to all panelists. This has been a remarkable conversation. It's been so interesting. I've learned so much. I love the secrets, and I love you all being able to share your journey with us. I will say, libraries. If you don't know where to start, and you guys said it, even by being in your own library, go to your libraries, because they will, some of the even the databases are free at your libraries, right?
Yes.
So it's so wonderful. And I just want to thank all of you. I also want to thank our great friends at WIDA. They have been giving extraordinary offerings of monthly virtual series for Finding Your Roots, national conversations. The last one will culminate on April 12th with an appearance of Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr. himself. Of course, we always want to remind you that Season 9 of Finding Your Roots is on television right now. It continues on your local public television station. You can also stream it at pbs.org. Well, we are so delighted that you have spent the evening with us. We hope you've learned a little bit. We hope you're going to start drawing your family tree, starting with yourself and thinking about all of the tips you received this evening. And we hope to see you on April 12th, and hope you just are getting to explore who you are and persevere through all of that, through the family sagas and the stories. Well, I'm Heather Marie Montilla, and until next time, good night.